Hey everybody, and welcome to the Double Stuff podcast, where we're double the hosts and double the topics and double the fun. I'm Dan.
I'm Charity.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Sarah.
And
Why do you always yell your name, Alan?
I want to make sure I get heard.
I thought I was a little bit NPR on my delivery anyway. So, hey, and today we are talking about one of my favorite just entertainment things in the world, which is video games, which I don't believe a lot of you guys do. I play.
I was gonna say, I feel like I'm going to be very silent this episode.
Well, so I guess what I wanted to start off with asking is, like, I play video games all the time. Have you guys ever played a video game? And if so, do you remember which one? Do you remember what your first one was?
The only time we played video games is when we would go to visit our grandma's house at Christmas time, and our cousin Travis was there, and he had all the basketball,
the NBA stuff.
Yeah, all the sports games. And so we would play for maybe a total of like a minute, but then we didn't know how the buttons worked, and he would get annoyed at that. And then our dad's like, oh, let me show you. And then it would be a whole hour of my dad and my cousin playing games and us looking over his shoulder.
And then our Uncle Kevin would be there, so it'd be the three of them kind of.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. If we had brothers, then maybe we probably would have. But that's not saying that video games are just for boys. But growing up, we didn't have video games. So if we had a brother, he probably would have asked my dad for video games growing up.
And growing up, that's often what, video games were marketed to, was boys.
Yeah.
Primarily, even though that wasn't necessarily the only audience for them. So neither of you really have any experience with video games at all then.
Well,
we had the little Tamagotchi off-brand one.
Hey,
that's not a video game though.
Tamagotchi are like Tiger, like those little Tiger electronic things.
We had the Kmart brand. Like, we were not rolling the dough when we grew up.
They weren't Tiger, they were like Lion.
Yeah,
maybe
it was
like Cub Electronics.
I don't even. It was just a square with like little antennas. It wasn't even like a thing.
I always thought mine was a dog, but now I'm not 100%.
It was whatever you wanted it to be.
It was definitely a pixel of some.
They always died after about a week with the little X's over their eyes. So yeah.
Alan, I know we've talked about playing video games before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what, do you remember like what the first video game was that you played?
The very first game, I remember I was over at a friend's house and we played on an Intellivision.
Oh, okay.
And it was a wired remote that looked like a television set remote. And then it had some sort of a like circle dial on it. It was probably a precursor to like a D-pad or something like that.
Like a joystick?
Yeah, a joystick. Yeah. And we would play Pong and I think it was Asteroids or something like that. There was, I think he had a really cool game that had a lot more color, and I think it was Joust. And that was my introduction to it, but it was many years before we could have, or I had a game system in our house.
Okay.
So the first person on the block that had both an Atari and a Nintendo, I mean, everybody was over at, I want to say his name was Michael Smitherton.
Michael Smitherton.
That's Tommy's brother. That's Tommy's brother, yes.
Yeah. And we would always go over to his house and play, and then eventually we got a Nintendo, and then the Game Boy. We've always just been Nintendo until PlayStation came along, and we had a PlayStation.
Nice. And I'm trying to remember, because there's so many old systems that people don't think about. There's the Commodore 64, there's the ColecoVision, there's the Atari, the Intellivision. The Intellivision was the one that not only had the dial and the controller. Was that the one that you could slide like the...
You put the cards in it,
the cards in it, so that way the buttons will do different things depending on the game you're playing. Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Well, before you change topics, me and Trey are laughing, but at the same time, we had something when we grew up.
Oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed for you to tell this, because this sounds like we're 6 years old.
Well, we
had an abacus.
We played with sticks and rocks. Go up, play, kids.
Yeah. No, but it was something we didn't realize. I didn't realize what it was until last night when we were researching for this. It was something that we grew up playing with. It was a Sega brand.
Oh.
And it was called a Pico.
That's a popular name.
It is a popular name. It's a name that I recognize. No, it was called a Pico, a Sega Pico. I didn't know what that was until last night. So it looked like a giant,
like a pen tablet. Almost.
It looked like a pen tablet, like a touchpad pad with a pen, and you put in this cartridge, looked like a book, and you put the cartridge in, and the two that we played with the most, it was Winnie the Pooh.
I think we've talked about this before.
We probably have, and then Richard Scarry, Busy Town.
Oh, okay.
And so you put in the cartridge and you turn the pages in the book, and my dad will hook it up to the back of our enormous old school television set, and it would be all that pixel stuff, but and then we had this big pen that was attached to it, and you could tap on the book and also on the screen to interact with the characters.
Interesting.
So it had like a flip card match game and the balloon game, which I think we talked about, and like Winnie the Pooh has to jump through the honeycomb to get to the honey pot. Like it was really it was not any of the fun stuff you were talking about. This is like educational baby games.
But one day at church, all the kids were talking about all the cool video games they had and all the different models. And so I was like, I want to be in the conversation. I don't know what our thing is called, but I know it was Sega. And I was like, that was the only thing I knew.
How about that Winnie the Pooh game, guys?
No, but I don't want to say Winnie the Pooh. They're saying this like, well, we have a PlayStation. I literally said PlayStation. They're like, what? No, you don't. I'm like, yeah, we do. I didn't say what games we played.
It's a station where we played.
Oh, no.
So I did a lot of that.
That is funny. I mean, Sega's a big name, or at least was a very big name. I mean, they were a big competitor to Nintendo. And now you mentioned that you played like Nintendo primarily. That's what I started with. I had an NES. That was my first system. My parents bought it much later after it had come out. I mean, the Super Nintendo was already out at the time, but I didn't know any better. And we played Mario and Duck Hunt. That was my first game. My mom and I played Mario all the time.
And it was on the one cartridge.
On the one cartridge, you had the little zapper gun that you'd like have to stick right up to the TV screen to get the ducks. So yeah, that was my first one. But then I moved on after that. I moved into a Game Boy Pocket, which was the second version of one of the big white Game Boys that you see.
I don't remember the Pocket version.
The Pocket was a tiny little, just very much smaller version of the Game Boy, and it was just a second iteration between the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color.
Yep. I don't remember that one.
Yep, that was the first one that I had, and then I had a Game Boy Color, and then I've had every system that's come out basically from Nintendo. Was the Game Boy Pocket,
was it like purple?
It could be. I mean, mine was clear. I had like a clear plastic one. They had multiple different colors. That was a big thing. And it had more of a gray screen as opposed to a green screen.
Because Dan, you're the youngest here, right? Aren't you?
I mean, I don't think so.
No, Charity's the youngest. Me and Dan are the same.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I don't know. Well, I was gonna say maybe it wasn't marketed to you.
Old Grandpa Allen remembers so much.
No, it was just. I mean, it all was rolling out, and it was like Japan had it first. Yes. You'd hear about if you had Nintendo Power, you could kind of like hear what was coming and when it was coming. The U.S. markets, especially Toys R Us, they didn't really stock it until they knew that it was going to sell, and so it was the NES, the regular Game Boy, the Super Nintendo.
The Super Nintendo, the Super Nintendo came out in the late 80s,
and
really.
Then Game Boy Advance, and then it was
Game Boy Color first. So the Game Boy Color as well, which was in between the Game Boy Advance and then the 64.
But that never really took off.
The Game Boy Advance?
No, the Color. No, the Advance took off.
The Game Boy Color was fairly popular, but again, it was just a Game Boy, but you could like play games
Is that
color.
the thing that the teacher would take away from you in school because you're playing it at your desk?
All the time.
Because our teacher had this little basket at her desk that like she would confiscate things. And it's like, you're playing in your desk. Go put your toy in the box.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, so now I know what it is.
Confiscated, for sure. So what's interesting is you mentioned Japan, and that's like something that we were, because Nintendo is a Japanese company. What's really fascinating is that they have been around since the 1800s. Nintendo as a company has been owned by one family up until fairly recently, and they made playing cards originally.
What?
And they made playing cards, and then they made little plasticky toys, like a little grabber. It was like a little extended hand, like you squeeze the trigger and it would extend out and then grab stuff and pull back.
That's what people use now to pick up garbage on the side of the highway.
Exactly.
It used to be the very first video game.
So that was all that, and then they made the Game & Watch, which is kind of like a book, like what you were talking about, except it would flip open horizontally, and it would have basically a black and white screen with little pixels that were all on it, and it would just light up certain pixels in black whenever you move.
Ooh.
So that like this little guy catching balls, so you'd like move to the left and like his hands would like move this way and that way and you'd have to catch stuff.
What?
So it was really neat. And now they're they are like the name in video games. They're not the most popular now, but they are probably the most recognizable or like well known among most people. And what's fascinating, I think, about you guys in particular not playing a lot of video games is how big video games have gotten in the industry. So I was doing some research.
You did research.
Dan's doing research.
I'm so proud of you.
Video games,
just like me.
Video games are the most lucrative entertainment industry on the planet today.
I didn't know that.
By a lot. So in 2019, they were valued at $145 billion. To put that in perspective, the movie industry is valued at $42 billion. And music comes in at 20.
Is this in sales?
This is in sales.
Okay.
Now, one thing I was thinking of is that, well, maybe it's because video games cost like $60 a pop, right? Mm-hmm. Except for back in 2008, video game industry was valued at $8 million. So in those 8 years, it grew from 8 to 145.
This is just for America or all over?
This is just all over. This is all over. This is box office. This is compared to like box office and movies and stuff like that. So more people are playing games now than ever before.
Well, and that also coincides with online capabilities. So
absolutely,
no longer are you just playing by yourself.
And it's mobile. It's on your computer. That's it's on Facebook. I mean, everything kind of counts towards it.
So what's the difference in sales from like last year? Because we were in lockdown.
Yeah.
And you couldn't leave your house.
Even higher.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of money probably just boomed from last year because we couldn't go anywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
That
One mile marker was because I'm pretty much 100% Steam. I just I play everything on a computer with Steam, and all of a sudden, publisher like blowout and sales like it was everywhere. So you could get a $50 game for like $9 or something like that.
Absolutely.
And it you could get bundles. They were bundling up everything. I got the Mega Man bundle, like 1 through 10.
Oh yeah, that's a great set. Absolutely, I love those Mega Man Legacy collections. So it fascinates me when I talk to people who haven't really played a lot of games, whether it's on like mobile or anything like that, because it's when I was growing up, it was such a niche thing. I mean, I was a weirdo for playing video games, and there were people like friends and stuff like that. They might play Madden, they might play basketball, like what you're talking about, but not
Super
like
Tecmo
a lot of the games that I was talking about. So, I mean, I think a big thing that I like about it the most compared to some other industries is the interactivity and the agency that you have when you're playing a video game. There's just no other medium other than maybe even like a choose your own adventure books, or something like that, where you get to play an active role in a story. And not every game does that.
That's the key, Dan. I think in the past 15 years, where like traditionally was kind of the role-playing games, the Final Fantasies and things like that, storytelling has become the story of each game is just as important as what was once the character and the world that they were in, and now every game has a story to it, and it's a good story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they can tell really phenomenal stories now. But what's fascinating is, like, if you look at the industry as a whole, single-player games are going down in sales. People are less interested necessarily in the storytelling games. They're all in the multiplayer aspect of it. But the stories are getting better than ever. Back in the 90s, the computer, like Apple computers and stuff like that, LucasArts in particular was making adventure games, which were all story-based games, and they were all puzzles. You had to find like little puzzles, you had to solve like mysteries, move on to the next area, and it was very simple. And now we have these huge epic stories that get told, and so many people are playing them, obviously.
In endless worlds.
It's insane. It's really crazy. So as kind of creators, which we kind of all are, and thinking about the different things that and thinking of things that you can kind of do with video games, with interactivity. Yeah. If you ever were to ask to make a game, write it, not necessarily program it, but write a game. Can you think of like, there's different genres in games. So there's like role-playing games, which is like Dungeons and Dragons. There are shooters, like military shooters or sci-fi shooters. There's sports games. There's strategy games. There's all sorts of things. Is there anything that like you can think of that if you're like, this would be good as a game, basically, as opposed to just like any other medium?
Yeah,
you think of anything?
I got one.
Yeah.
One of my favorites were Mario came out in the early 2000s with a Super Mario RPG or something like that. So when you can take something that is like a classic and then merge it with like another genre or something like that. And I've always been a fan of the WrestleManias and wrestling.
Yeah.
But it all takes place in the ring. What if you could level up your wrestler, run around and do certain tasks like Grand Theft Auto style or something like that, and then come back and be able to wrestle another heel or something like that more and more, or be the heel or whatever. I think that would be a lot of fun.
That would be would something like that entail, like with wrestling in particular, would it be like realistic, or would it be like a fantasy thing?
No, it would be totally fantasy.
I just mean like where
it would be rated M for fantasy violence.
like where the stories that are in the ring get extended outside of the ring, basically.
Yeah.
That'd be neat. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
See, I don't have too much to contribute to this. However, last semester was actually my first time teaching college students about that, even though I don't have that much knowledge about video games. But for my media analysis class, I had them watch a documentary about Darkest Dungeon, which was a game I'd never heard about, but it was a fascinating documentary on. It gives the step-by-step on how the two guys met in college, and then how the step-by-step process it takes to create a simple game. And then, of course, as the popularity grew, their stuff became more and more involving and realistic and stuff. But
is this the story of Diablo, or is this like a real game?
It's a real game called Darkest Dungeon. Yeah, and like I said, I had never heard about it prior to this documentary. And like I said, I had my students watch it because I had to talk about video games in class, because a lot of the students are majoring in that, whether it's character design, background, whatever. And so I will say that part did kind of intimidate me, because I'm like, how am I going to teach something that I really don't have that much knowledge on? So yeah, talking about how there is a big percentage of that having control over your character in the story, that is really big. It also leads to when you're really getting invested into it. So that, like I said, the documentary kind of talks about that too, how people got really into it, and even some of the little bugs they had, people were like, what, this game sucks now because you did this, and then they tried to change it. Oh, well, now you're trying to conform to everybody, so then it's also dealing with trying to cater to your audience, because it's like trying to make everybody happy is an exhausting job.
It's impossible.
But it seems like in the gaming industry, I guess you kind of have to do it at least to the best of your ability, because you have such a big audience of various ages. It's not just 18 years. You have people, little kids are doing it. So then you're trying to figure out what can you do to cater to kids of whatever age, old enough to hold a controller, to a full-grown adult that can do that. So I always kind of wonder, how does that work? Because you have your learning games, stuff that school children use. We also have, kind of like we were talking about, just combat games or whatever that can appeal to everybody. So I always kind of wonder how they deal with that, having test audiences and beta and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What's really interesting about it is how things have changed. Because when I was growing up, you bought a game. That was it. They made a game, they put it on a cartridge or on a disc, and they sent it to you, and that was the game you got. And if it was buggy or if you didn't like something about it, too bad. Now games can be patched. Yeah. So what they do is they can send updates through the internet and make sweeping changes to the game, even physical games that you own. So it's like this weird back and forth between creators and audience, where you can basically say, I don't like this, and the creators can say, we will change it.
Right.
Which, unless you're George Lucas, you don't get to do that in a lot of ways, and different, whether it's movies or books or things like that.
Is there still a lot of pushback on video games? Because I feel like
that's where I want to.
Go ahead with yours, and I have I remember late '90s, early 2000s, probably because I was entering my teenage years. There was a big pushback, maybe from the churches or youth camps or whatever. It's video games are violent, and that's the reason why everyone's in jail. Violence and how it affects the young mind and all that stuff. Is that still a big taboo
Not as
thing
much
right
anymore.
now?
And the reason is because all of that stuff has been proven to be untrue. Yeah. Video games, it's studies after studies that they've been able to do now over long periods of time has shown that
people
playing
were
violent video games
without video games.
They don't need help, basically.
In fact, in a lot of ways, it can be beneficial.
It can be cathartic.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, not only that, but it could be a skill set that a particular industry was looking for. I was
aviation, when they train pilots and stuff.
Things like that.
Simulators. And
absolutely, which is kind of where I'm coming, because I'm a big Ernest Cline fan, and so looking into the future and his prophecies of the Oasis, and with the popularity of Second Life and things like that, where do you see the video game industry going? Is it 100% immersed?
See, I have a VR set. I have a VR headset, and it's passable, but it's definitely like you can tell you're in a game. It's not super like immersive. I think that they are creating that stuff,
Yeah,
but it's
that's
going to
the
be so
scary-
cost prohibitive. I don't think a lot of people are
probably all
going to
in
get
Japan
to
right
enjoy it.
Yeah,
They've got all the cool toys right now.
It's working its way into the U.S., but I think it might. I mean, but we've advanced so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be sooner to what we're. It's like, oh, it's going to be a long ways away.
I think it
That's
will.
what I
It
think
could
too.
happen tomorrow, and it wouldn't seem that far fetched.
Well, I think he's just talking about the affordability. Will the average guy go out and get however thousands
Well, it's
of
still
dollars
a
that
video
worth?
game, even if it's VR, until it becomes the Oni set, and it
That's-
becomes where you cannot tell the difference between reality and what it is that you've allowed yourself to participate in, and that's the scary thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, we are already living in a simulation.
And if you ask Elon Musk,
This podcast isn't real.
Elon
Nothing's
Musk,
real.
I forget his percentage. I think he's at like 80. He's 87% sure that we are in a simulation, or at least he is.
I'll lean toward the he is, but
so take off your headset and open your eyes.
That's right. Let the scales fall off your eyes.
Well, thanks everybody for letting me ramble a little bit about one of my favorite topics in the world of video games. And I guess I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sarah so she will let us know where you can listen to all of our fun podcasts.
yeah, if you want to listen to our most updated, newest episodes, you can check out all the podcast platforms. For all of our archived episodes, just go to doublestuffpod.com. All of our social media stuff is there as well. Go to Facebook and Instagram at Double Stuff Podcast and Twitter at Double Stuff P, and that's the letter P.
Da 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 da.